All right, guys, so today we're going to review writing with dialogue, how you would include dialogue and quotation marks to show conversation between your characters, and how they'll be used while you're doing your writing. So, your objective, this is what you need to be able to do. The student needs to be able to use, and it has italics and titles, but looking at the very ending part, including quotation marks in dialogue and commas in compound sentences. So, this week we're going to do dialogue. Next week we're going to do compound sentences. So, dialogue is a conversation between two or more people as part of a play, a movie, or a piece of literature or writing like you're writing. It can be the conversation between characters. It can be a character talking to an audience in the example of a play. It can also be a character's thoughts to themselves. And you want to be very purposeful when you're using dialogue. The dialogue should help drive the story, should have meaning and influence the plot. You use dialogue to characterize or reveal traits about characters, and the speaker tags show emotion. She exclaimed, he shouted. We'll talk about speaker tags in a moment. And dialogue should also provide information about what's going on in the events of the plot. What isn't an example of dialogue? Sarah asked if she could go to the store. Well, that's not a conversation between Sarah and anyone else necessarily. Juan told Mike he was too tall for the ride. So in these examples, they're not really showing what the speaker, like Sarah or Juan, are really saying. It's just showing the reader that this conversation took place. In Monday's passage about Arachne and Athena, here's a zoomed in portion of that passage where we actually had dialogue between the characters, and you see punctuation like commas, quotation marks, and then even question marks to show who was saying what. So here is one quote, and they've broken it up into pieces. If we start on the left, Mary's the one who's doing the talking. Mary said, this is what we would call the character tag or the speaker tag. It tells who said what and how. Then we have a comma right after the word said and the first quotation mark. The quotation marks open and close what's being said. So after the comma, we have a quotation mark, and Mary is saying, I love my English class, and she has an exclamation point for her ending punctuation, and then the quote ends with quotation marks. So speaker tag, comma, quotation marks, what's being said, ending punctuation, and ending quotation mark. But sometimes sentences don't always begin with a speaker tag. The speaker tag can come at the beginning, the end, or even in the middle of dialogue. So the first bullet point shows where the speaker tag is at the front. We have a comma, quotation mark, and what's being said, with ending punctuation and ending quote. Sometimes it happens at the end. Here we have the same thing. Beginning quotation mark, I love my English class, exclamation point, quote, said Mary. There's no comma needed here between that ending quote between the word said and that quotation mark right in front of it. No comma is needed there in this type of writing. And then sometimes it comes in the middle. I, comma, quotation mark, said Mary, comma. This one's a little bit more confusing because you have to have two commas, unlike some of the other ones. So let's take a look. We also want to spice it up. Don't just say Mary said, James said, William said. Instead of using the word said, Mary can exclaim, Mary can declare, Mary can shout, Mary can suggest. Your verbs for how the speaking is being done is important. So don't always say Mary said all the time. Let's practice with, this is one slide and there'll be another slide with a second one. Susie replied, I like baking cookies and delivering them to the firehouse. This is a quote, but there's no punctuation being used. We need to add a comma, we need to add quotation marks. So look down below in blue. Susie replied, that's our speaker tag. So Susie replied, comma, beginning quotation mark, I like baking cookies and delivering them to the firehouse, period, ending quotation mark. Here's a second one. I never knew how hard it is to wrap a present, said Todd. So we know that Todd is our speaker. We need to add the comma and quotation marks. Okay, so it begins with a quotation mark with the capital I. I never knew how hard it is to wrap a present, comma, quotation mark, said Todd. So that is all we have for that part. And then tomorrow you're going to do some independent practice. Nice job. Thanks.